Cool. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for asking, Simon. It is great to make your acquaintance. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, excited to chat and yeah, learn more about this topic. Oh wait, sorry. Let me just something's being really loud. I'm gonna stop it from being loud. I'll be right back.
No worries.
Well, my like Roomba was trying to get into the closet.
No worries. Totally understand. Now listen, we have a half hour. We are going to cover a lot of ground. I'm really excited about it. What I'd like to do is a brief introduction, you and me. Then I want to know a little bit about what your intents are, what you want to see happen here, and then I'm going to help you get there. So, first off, I want to just introduce myself. Hello, I'm Robert Rogers. I work for Contra Costa County Supervisor John Joya. Communications is one of my specialties. I'm a former journalist as well. I grew up in Southern California, went to UC Berkeley, also worked in journalism for about 10 years, and now am in public service. I'm a huge fan of Lifelong Medical Center and the work that you do, and the idea that I can work with the residents and the future physicians and public health experts in our communities and beyond is something that's really exciting to me, and I'm very honored to do it. Thanks so much. I live in Richmond and I'm happily married, father of three. Simon, let me hear a little bit about you, please.
Cool. Yeah, we're really grateful to be able to work with you as well. And like from what I've heard from the other residents, it's been like really enlightening and like really helpful to meet with you. So yeah, thanks for making the time to meet with us. But I'm Simon. I'm a third year family medicine resident. I'm originally from LA. Um, and I'm interested in addiction medicine. I'm actually gonna become a, or I actually matched at Kaiser Oakland to do addiction medicine for a year, as a fellow there, next year. And yeah, I'm Korean. That's me. Yeah.
Tremendous. And lastly, you grew up in LA, right? Did LA County or
Yeah, in Koreatown, LA.
in the city? Terrific.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in Orange County in a city called Brea that's right on the LA Orange County border.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know Brea.
Terrific. Well, and I've been in the Bay now since 2009. So this is home now. I really love it. Now, let's talk a little bit about what you hope to accomplish during our session. I want to make sure that we meet those goals.
Sorry, I'm just waiting for this to, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we met with Daphne and Daphne wants us to like, learn the basics of how to write an op-ed. And the topic that I chose was like centered on addiction medicine. And I know that like a really hot topic right now is on like harm reduction, like preventing opioid overdose deaths. And like one intervention that's like controversial, but also has been proven to be effective in like different geographic regions, has been like overdose prevention centers and safe injection sites. So would love to like learn more about the history of like what's been done around that topic in general of like preventing opioid overdose deaths in Richmond, and also like if there has been any like conversations around starting or something of that kind of intervention of an overdose prevention center in Richmond.
That's excellent. Super exciting. I'm really happy to dive into this topic. I think it's a good one. I think it's powerful and provocative and engaging. And it's something that can be explicated in a way that could demystify and also turn down some of the fear that might be surrounding the topic and really be able to reveal clinical applications that might be helpful to public health in general. Now, here's what's crucial. Let's start from a basic foundational perspective. Op-ed. Our aim here is an op-ed, and that's short for opinion editorial. Opinion, we have, of course know what that means. Editorial, you may be less familiar with that word. It's used in news jargon and has been for a couple of centuries, and it means particularly advancing a point of view, advancing an opinion, persuading and convincing our readers of the reliability, accuracy, and righteousness of our cause. Essentially, you need to convince me, and I may be skeptical, that your way here is the right way. That's what an op-ed is. There are other pieces and there are other ways that we can give backgrounders or research proposals on projects that don't take a point of view. But here's going to be one of those few times, probably, in your young physician career, that you're really going to be advancing an opinion that others who might be experts in the field might disagree with, right? But this is something where you're really able to step forward, step out, and try to persuade other people that this is the right way, this is the right thing. And your opinion is not one that is to be taken lightly. You are a resident, you are a doctor to be, if you will, and forgive me if I mischaracterize that position. But that gives you a very special area of expertise that allows us to right away know this is someone to be listened to. This is a powerful signal. This is why, I don't know how familiar you might be with like the New York Times, many regarded as the best newspaper in the world. I would be one of those, certainly in the ballpark. Their op-ed pages are the envy of the world to some degree because they have this mix. They have professional columnists who take on a variety of topics over time and do all kinds of great things. But a lot of times the best op-eds are the ones that are coming from guest columnists that aren't professional columnists or journalists. They're professionals in other fields, right? So that anthropologist who comes in and gives us an op-ed on just why it is that evolution has made us do this or that in our societies today, or that expert in a particular form of medicine who's telling us just how serious the sugar and obesity epidemics are, right? Or you name the expert. So you have an expertise in this topic, and that makes you particularly important to listen to on this issue. And we're going to need that cachet. We're going to need that credibility because we're going to be advancing a topic that might have some people immediately on the defensive. Now, where do we begin? How do we start? The crucial one, I see the work that needs to be done right in your, I'll call it pitch email that you sent me, right? It's fantastic. I want to talk about the pros and cons of opening an overdose prevention center, safe injection site in Richmond, along with the history of the topic and what's been done to interact with people at overdose deaths in Richmond. Now, there's a lot there, and we can touch it all effectively. But before we have to distill, right before we do that, we have to distill a thesis. And I know you're familiar with that word with a background in academia. And that word has an application. It looks a little differently in popular media and in op-eds, but it's essentially the same thing. You've got to be able to tell me what your thesis is, more like a conclusion, but what your point of view is, what your idea is, your opinion is on this. And you got to be able to tell me this in a very clear and concise way that's unmistakable in the point you're trying to make. So the pros and cons, we can do pros and cons, right? But we can't do it until we've decided what the real pro is. The cons are going to be useful in advancing the pro. We're not here to give them equal weight. We're not here to give them a classic journalistic article or a classic research article. Point of view, op-ed. So I have to challenge you now. Now, maybe you're not ready to make that conclusion because you haven't done enough preliminary research, but you have to do it. Are you ready to tell me why we must open prevention centers, safe injection sites in Richmond? Or why we can't do that? Can you tell me that yet? Are you ready for that yet?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much like solidly on the pro camp of things when it comes
Excellent.
to, yeah.
I don't want to overstate my clairvoyance case, but I figured that's where we were going, and I'm glad to hear it. because we can work with this. So the thesis is going to be very simple. The thesis has got to be something that you can do in the one sentence elevator rule. The elevator rule is this analogy of like, imagine Daphne is getting into an elevator and those doors are closing and you have to tell her that one thing before those doors shut. You've got to get it across, right? What is it? You're going to say, Daphne, we have to open overdose prevention safe injection sites in Richmond. Or we must open overdose prevention safe injection sites in Richmond to save lives. That's the answer to the opioid crisis. Okay, so that's the thesis, and that's what we're going to work with. We always have to go back to that. And everything that we do in this piece has to ultimately answer the question, how does this advance my thesis? And it doesn't have to be directly. The cons are going to be part of advancing this thesis, right? No argument is credible without rationally and honestly addressing the potentially conflicting opinions on this, or conflicting research for that matter, right? That's where the credibility comes from. That's why this is better than an advertisement that never does that, right? This is a reasoned debate. And in reasoned debates, we don't duck the other side. We address it and we explain why it's wrong, right? And we also have to advance evidence, theory, and data. Those have to be in there. And that's covering the other part of your email. Remember, we're going to get all of those in there, but you might be surprised at how briefly we do some of them, right? They're going to be little nuggets rather than full-fleshed ideas. But those nuggets, again, how do they serve the thesis that we're advancing? Always the question, how do we serve it? Now, let's talk about the larger structure of the op-ed piece. Now, classically, you're going to hear 750 words. That's a New York Times invention, to my knowledge. And it's a good one. It's a convention that is often used, and it works. But shorter is better. Can you tell me this story as well as possible in 300 words, or 400 words, or 500 words? If you need to go to 750, then go to 750. But my guess is there'll be places where we can prune and pare. The shorter we can get, the better we are. I don't want to overdo my Shakespeare quotes, but brevity really is the soul of wit. And it's also the nuts and bolts of persuasion. We must capture and keep attention. And that attention has to be fostered and nourished and kept with every line we write. Every line has to have a purpose. So, what might a structure look like, right? Well, there are various different ways that you can do this. But the key is those first few sentences are the most important always in every op-ed. I'm going to repeat that. Your first sentence is always the most important one in the op-ed. The next couple of sentences are probably the next important ones. One of those is probably going to contain the thesis. The thesis might be a little lower, but that's going to be a super important one too, and it can't be more than a few sentences down. We must know why we are reading this, why this is important. There's no mystery here. There's no let's reveal something late in the piece. Those kinds of conventions for fiction can be great, but they're not going to work in this respect. So, what might, for instance, a hook leading into a thesis, leading into the next stage, what that might that look like? I'll go into it, but before I do that, I've been talking a while. I want to find out, do you have any reflections on what I've said? And, or do you want to address that most recent question?
No, I think all that makes sense. Definitely, like the more powerful op-ed pieces that I've read have been like the shorter and sweeter ones that have been able to like hold my attention. And then yeah, I really like the idea of like credibly addressing the cons and like yeah, the comparison between like an advertisement and an op-ed was like a really interesting one that I haven't heard before, but makes a lot of sense.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
in terms of like a hook, I don't really have like that's not really like my strong suit. But maybe like something to do with like overdose deaths and or like visible drug use on the streets as like a controversial topic area, and then like including the thesis of like overdose prevention centers um saving lives.
Yep. Well, that's excellent. That's pretty good. I really like that. Thank you, Simon. What I would say about the hook is it can take many forms. It's a lot like the way you would look at it from public speaking perspective, right? What are you going to say to get the audience rapt attention right away? And you're going to earn that attention with something very special early on, and then you're going to sustain that attention throughout with relevant data, rational arguments, vivid examples, and also credible tackling or diagnosing or dissecting of potentially credible counter arguments. You need to have all of that, right? So what might a hook be, whether it's for public speaking or for op-ed? I'll just throw some ideas out. When I do, you'll probably have some ideas yourself. The hook could be an anecdote. I like those. The anecdote is a short story. We love stories. Humans remember stories. They feel stories. It's always better than data in that respect. When cavemen and women expressed themselves 100,000 years ago, it wasn't with numbers. It was with pictures of hunts or whatever else on the wall, right? It was storytelling. And oral histories came down through those as well, right? And that still applies today, even more so with our attention span so stressed. So what could that look like? Well, story is a little bit deceiving in the sense that the average person probably assumes something relatively long. How can we tell a story in a couple of sentences of vivid detail, right? It might be, I can remember the first time that I was made directly aware of the opioid crisis that's crushing us in the Bay Area. I was walking to my course at Lifelong Medical Center, and I saw an overdose victim right there on the sidewalk and sprung into action. We got into the ER and he survived, but we know the crisis remains. Boom, story told. I'm in, I am wrapped. Now tell me what your point is. For a thesis, for us to save lives in the future, we must open overdose prevention centers or the safe injection sites in the city of Richmond. Lives are at stake. Next sentence. I understand this might sound crazy. Others have said that this could foster drug use. While well-intentioned, those counter arguments are sadly astray. And I have the data and the examples to coherently explain why. Boom, boom, boom. Let's move into the body of our piece. Then will come the end. And what do we do in the end? Well, the old adage is, whether it's in public speaking or in persuasive op-eds, it's always, tell me what you're going to tell me. Tell me how you told me that, why it's important, and then tell me again, right? Wrap it up with a bow at the end. You might at the end revisit that anecdote from the beginning. You might revisit just how important the issue is. You might revisit the fact that others may believe this isn't the case, but this truly is the way to go, right? The anecdote hook, it works, a tried and true formula. I know you said that's not your strong suit. Maybe you don't have an anecdote. We can't manufacture one. It's got to be authentic, got to be real. If you do have one, I should note, vivid details. That's what we remember. When I tell you a story about a colleague and what he experienced when he saved a heart attack victim, that sounds good. But if you tell me that story and you say, and that's when I heard the breastplate be opened up and that crack was echoing throughout the emergency room. That's what I'm going to remember. That's that vivid detail, right? Or if you say, when the man came in, what I noticed right away was he only had one shoe on. Won't forget that, right? Vivid details not only put us there, but they nourish and support and sharpen our memories for the other details that are associated. Anecdotal lead. What's another way to do an incredible hook? The shocking data point, right? What if you told me that? Did you know that there's a crisis right here in our community that's more deadly than AIDS, gunfire, and childhood cancer combined? Do you know what it is? Oh, and this tragic death toll is completely preventable. Oh my gosh. Do you have my attention? I am primed. I need to know. It's the opioid crisis, and it's unfolding right under our noses. And sadly, we have not taken the measures to save these lives. Now is the time to act. Oh my gosh, I'm ready to go, right? Anecdote? Shocking statistic? What about the idea that the countervailing argument idea, right? Which is, what if I told you that the best way to reduce unnecessary deaths from addiction is to allow addicts to take the dose in a safe and responsible way? What? I can't believe that. What is this guy crazy? I have to continue reading, right? Any one of those are an option for a hook. Now, you can also do a hook that's just a straight news lead type hook, right? In other words, this issue is so incredible, so persuasive, so compelling, I don't even need to hype it with these tools. I could just say, I could be a declarative sentence to start, right? I don't need to remind you that the opioid crisis is not only national news, but it's decimating our community here in Richmond today. And we must do something about it. Okay? Not my favorite way to go, but it's a solid way to go. That works, right? Then again, we got to move into the thesis. And that thesis has got to be sharp, right? What is it? Maybe it's, we need to open safe injection and what's the phrase? Overdose prevention and safe injection centers. We need to open those in our community as soon as possible. The more, the better, right? Okay. Then I need all those, I need the persuasive case. Now, how are you going to make that argument? I need data. I need logic. I need supporting figures, supporting ideas, right? Let's say, for instance, the Surgeon General has recommended this exact course of action. Note that as well. Let's say the president said that's the way to go. Note that as well, right? What's one of the most powerful signals to anybody that an argument is correct, accurate, righteous? It's sort of called the crowd effect, right? Politicians often use this, right? Everybody says this or whatever. That doesn't mean that it's duplicitous in any way. It's a powerful tool. We as humans are social animals. If we know that other people we like and respect are feeling the same way, then we're going to be more apt to take that position. We need to know that. Now, here's the problem. There's a lot of people who are going to already have preconceived notions about this. You have to think, how am I going to reach those people? Well, a good way is going to be exactly that phrase. After the hook lead, the thesis, the supporting paragraphs, as we get lower into the story, a great new paragraph might read, and when I say paragraphs, by the way, in news, I'm usually talking about 1 or 2 sentences, 3 at the most, bite-sized. I might start a new one like, I know a lot of this sounds a little crazy, sounds dangerous. Or I know you may be thinking the last thing that we need is a center like this in our community. You might say something like, I thought that same thing myself. Empathy, right? But after reviewing this data and after searching my conscience and with my public health expertise, I'm convinced that my initial reflections were wrong and that this really is the way to go, right? Then you could address specific counterarguments. There are those prominent person X or Y recently said that the growth of these centers is a recipe for disaster, right? And they further claimed that this would actually fuel addiction, right? Then you tell me, give me the data again about why that doesn't work, why that's not true. Now, what's key here is whenever you're knocking down a counter argument, the best way to do that is not to demonize your opponents or slap them aside or shout them down. And this is the equivalent of shouting them down in an op-ed piece, right? It's not that way. The best way to do it is to acknowledge the good intent or the fair ideas, but then concede, sadly, they're wrong, right? My colleague in the School of Medicine at University X is surely well-intentioned in this idea, but sadly, it turns out that she's misguided, right? Her point about this fueling addiction simply is not supported in the data. While it's intuitive, like many things in life, it's simply not true once it is put up to scrutiny, right? That's the effective way to knock down the counter argument. My opponents aren't fools or idiots, quite the contrary. I like them, they're well-intentioned. I wish I could go with them, but I can't. The data won't allow me to. That's persuasive. Now, we are rapidly running into the back end of our time. I will just say a few other things that are going to be, let me just give you some bullet points. Listen, don't overload me with data. Data is best used sparingly. We're talking about probably 1, 2, 3 data points at the most, probably, right? I'd say 2 or 3 is probably the sweet spot. Short, concise sentences, less commas, more periods. Each sentence clear, no superfluous words, no extraneous ideas. Everything must feed back into the thesis. Give me a vivid detail if you can. Is there a color? Is there a glint? Is there a shape? Show me something. More nouns and action verbs, less adjectives. Show me, don't tell me. You've probably heard that from your junior high creative writing class, but it works. Avoid jargon or overly technical prose. I know you're a doctor, your audience isn't. You can sprinkle 1 or 2, but don't overdo it. Conversationally. Read your op-ed piece out loud in the mirror. If it doesn't sound good, it doesn't read good. Acknowledge the other side respectfully and decently. I already mentioned that, but do that again. Don't worry about the headline, worry about the thesis. That's what's got to be sharp. The headline's the last thing you worry about. Shorter is better, both in sentences and total. Give me balance and symmetry. Make sure that that ending and that beginning are cohesive parts of a whole. With that, we are at 30 minutes. I'm happy to go beyond, and I'm here for you. I'm at your service. What can, questions, concerns, feedback? What do you got for me, Simon?
No, this is all really helpful. Yeah, I think I have like a clearer picture of what I need to do to draft something. Um, yeah, this is really helpful. I'll get to work.
Remember, it's this amazing balance that you strike, right? I am a doctor. I am an expert. I'm not saying you have to say these things, they're implied. I'm a doctor, I'm an expert, I'm learned in this field. I really believe in my point of view. I have the bona fides to back it up. That's all true. The form of the communication that I'm bringing to you readers, thousands of laymen and women across a diverse audience coming from every different aspect of our incredible communities. To them, I'm having a conversation, right? Don't talk to your colleagues at a conference on cardiology. Talk to the crowd gathered outside. Okay.
Yeah, super helpful. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Um, do I for would it be okay if I like sent you a draft of something prior to our next meeting, or is that how things go?
Sure. That's what your colleagues have done, and I've been happy to review and offer feedback.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah, I'm yeah, really excited and grateful to like have your expertise, and yeah, thank you so much for spending this time like sharing all your knowledge and wisdom with me.
I'm really grateful too, Simon. This has been a delightful conversation. I'm really excited about your topic. I'd love to be able to read it. I want to learn a few things myself, and let's learn from each other, and I'll provide you my honest feedback.
Cool. Sounds good.
And we're supposed to meet via Zoom next Thursday at 11:30.
I believe so,
Okay.
if it still works for you.
It will. It'll be just fine. Is it okay with you?
Yeah.
Terrific.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Simon, thank you and have a great day.
You as well. Bye-bye.